The Future Sport Podcast is brought to you by 3Advance, developers of sports tech apps that are AI-powered and UX-focused. So if you're looking to create some apps for your startup or your sports biz calls for some artificial or business intelligence, you should check out 3Advance. They're incredible. Go to 3advance.com. That's the number 3advance.com.
Empire.
The basketball revolution is upon us.
I'm in NBA gyms almost every week, and there's interns and people running around with notebooks and notepads, and they're tracking shots. But the key thing is understanding the why. Why is a player missing?
That's John Carter, CEO of Noah Basketball, a company who is telling your favorite team how to play. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. The NBA preseason tipped off this week, and the prevailing headline, it's got nothing to do with hoops, but what is happening in China, and whether a GM should weigh in on that. And the Rockets are paying a hefty price for questioning politics in one of the most important regions for the league in terms of exposure and growth. Now, on the court, Daryl Morey has been one of the founding fathers of data analytic-driven teams. Those late to the party, they've been left behind by the Rockets and others. And John Carter will join us to discuss how Noah Basketball is shaping the game. And it's not just the pros. Programs like Farleigh Dickinson are seeing the value in forward-thinking applications to practice regimens. Bruce Hamburger, the associate head coach of that program, will join us to tell us about their approach. But first, the future is now, with the baseball playoffs in full swing. Major League Baseball is changing up their digital lineup. They are replacing the forward-thinking BAMTech technology with Delta Tray Forge for their content management system. And Eric Prisbell has been following this for Sports Business Journal. Hey, Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bram. How are you doing?
Why are they doing this?
Yes, I mean that's the big question I had as well. And Delta Tray, it's going to be the new technology services provider for MLB, and it's backing its global network of nearly 300 digital destinations. And as a result, as you said, replaces BAMTech. And the seeds of this really were planted a couple years ago. And MLB Advanced Media, which is the digital arm of Major League Baseball, sold a majority stake of BAMTech, which has powered several OTT services, including HBO Now. They sold it to Disney in two separate transactions in 2016 and 17 that were collectively worth $2.58 billion. And with that, the tech stack went to Disney, and that's since become Disney Streaming Services. So Disney's focus right now with BAMTech is squarely on Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus. So it made, for Major League Baseball, it made this move almost inevitable. And 2 years ago, they engaged in a global search for a new CMS. Delta Tray's reputation around the world speaks for itself. Its portfolio now includes about 25 of the largest leagues and federations, including FIFA. And in 2018, it built a CMS that underpinned the revamping of NFL team websites. Jeff Volk is a high-level executive with Delta Tray. He's also a longtime former MLB Advanced Media and BAMTech executive as well. So he had a lot of relationships, all throughout, and that helped start up a conversation between Delta Tray and MLB. Long story short, they engaged in a proof of concept throughout the 2018 summer. MLB really liked how it was going, and the partnership was sealed at that point. But they still had an onboarding process for Delta Tray that took place over a course of 6 months or less, which is a heck of an achievement to get that all ready for opening day 2019, when they relaunched MLB.com and also the 30 team club websites. It didn't just go well; they were thrilled with how it went, and traffic was way up. MLB's platform drew 9.5 million sessions, which was a 9% increase from the previous year. They had the largest day ever in readers to MLB content, as they followed and approached the trade deadline this season. So that's all been phase one, the MLB.com relaunch and redesign, and also the 30-team websites. Now, in the coming months, comes the next phasing in for Delta Tray, and that involves, a couple hundred other Major League Baseball supported websites. I believe that involves other minor league websites and that sort of thing. So it's going to be throughout the Major League Baseball community, and it's going to make things more efficient and provide new content and quicker to deliver it to the fans and altogether make it a better fan experience and bring them closer to the game.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. What are the changes? How is the consumer experience different with this?
They've already redesigned the MLB.com website and also some sites with the 30-team clubs. But overall, they're going to introduce it makes it more nimble and flexible. And they're going to introduce live blogging, visual stories. It's more digestible for the fan. It's also more efficient for MLB. And I spoke to Chris Marinak, who's kind of a tech executive with MLB, a very impressive guy. He said, in the past, it would take 8 to 10 minutes to get a story published online. And now, with Delta Tray, they could have content, media, video, news, all of it delivered in less than a minute, sometimes in less than 30 seconds. So, baseball, MLB has always tried to stay ahead of the curve in terms of innovation and technology, going back almost 20 years now in terms of live streaming. And I think this is another step in that direction. And it also helps them, which is more important for all sports right now, engage and reach a younger demographic. Very important for baseball.
If only they could speed up their game. They've got everything else going hyperspeed.
That's high on the agenda, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. Eric Prisbell of Sports Business Journal. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks a lot, Brand.
Up next, John Carter, CEO of Noah Basketball, on the mountain of data changing how we hoop. This is the Future Sport Podcast. Our guest this week is John Carter. He is the CEO of Noah Basketball, which is a leader in the basketball shooting technology field and shooting research. Hey, John, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
You guys have been doing this a long time. Our listeners will be familiar with your name. But for those who don't know exactly what Noah Basketball is, can you kind of give us the overview of what you do?
Sure. So, we work with teams at all levels, from middle school to training facilities up to, we do business with about half the NBA teams. But we one of the biggest things that we do is provide the why. Okay, why a player is missing shots. A player can get up a small number of shots on our system, and we can tell them precisely what they need to work on. I think it was Doc Rivers that gave us the quote of knowing, anyone can track makes and misses. People have been doing that forever. I'm in NBA gyms almost every week. And there's interns and people running around with notebooks and notepads, and they're tracking shots. But the key thing is understanding the why. Why is a player missing? And we can tell you, wow, their trajectory is too high, trajectory is too flat from the left corner, or they tend to miss left 72% of the time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the biggest difference in what we do compared to if you want to call them repetition-type tools and just manual tracking.
We had the opportunity to do a demo with you before we started talking, and you said something that really stood out to me, which was, in the vein of what we're discussing here, why can't I just see that with the naked eye that this person is missing this way? There
are some things you can see. For example, if a player consistently misses short, you can see the ball hitting the front of the rim. If a player consistently misses to the left, you can see that a bit, but you can't see it precisely. The one thing that a player cannot see at all is the trajectory of the shot. How high are they shooting the ball? What is the entry angle? And, a player cannot see their own shot. Now, a spectator, a coach, whomever, they can see, wow, that player shoots way too flat. But the player behind the ball can't see it. So that really is the the genesis of the product is, how can we give a player feedback so that they can make that correction, so they can correct the muscle memory to shoot a more optimal shot. And then over time, it's evolved to where we're measuring ball position within the rim, facial recognition to identify the player, shot type identification, et cetera, et cetera.
It's interesting because, as a fan of the sport forever and a broadcaster, I've called out people for a flat shot forever. So it seems obvious to me when I see it, and not everybody shoots like Steph Curry, and it's obvious how he shoots the ball and it's different than others. How does the player not know that they need to make the correction?
Well, it's interesting. Players respond many different ways. But they have been told over and over and over. For example, a Tim Duncan who was a fairly successful flat shooter, but he wasn't super flat. But there's basically the players need some type of objective feedback. And here's the most common quote I get, Bram, at every level, whether it's an NBA coach or a middle school coach or just a dad working with his kid. And it's amazing how many times I've heard this same quote. And the quote is basically, it's amazing how this generation of players trust computers. And they will trust the verbal feedback, the computer feedback from Noah significantly more than they will a coach or a dad. And so that's just interesting. This generation of players won't argue with technology. And so if Noah says they're flat, they must be flat.
Yeah. So as we went through the demo, I got to see a cursory amount of what the data that is collected. And what it appears, at least from my viewpoint of what I've seen so far, is it's a lot of dots on a basketball court will show you the success rate of shots that went in. What then can you do with this data, and then what then can a team and a player do with it?
Sure. Well, we take the data, from an aggregated standpoint and do research. We have been at the Sloan Sports Conference at MIT the last couple of years. We won a couple of awards there, but we've collected data on about 200 million basketball shots. And from there, we can do, a great deal of research. And, for example, the number one indicator of a great shooter is left-right consistency. So if a player has good, strong left-right consistency, that's the number one indicator of their shooting prowess. A number two, and it's actually a fairly close second, is arc consistency. And if so that's kind of, and then the third thing, they want to get the ball deep enough in the basket to give it a fighting chance. And we found a lot of players that don't do that well enough. So we take the aggregated data, do some research, glean through the data, find insights that are helpful to our teams. One thing that's a lot of fun for us is, we have about half the NBA right now that is using Noah for their pre-draft workouts. So when players come into NBA gyms during this critical month, they're going to be evaluated. They're going to be evaluated on their left-right consistency. For example, the left-right consistency is one of the things, people talk about defense travels or other things travel. Left-right consistency, which is basically a combination of mechanics and talent, that travels from the high school three-point line to the college three-point line to the NBA three-point line. So teams are starting to really take notice of that. So from an individual, so that's kind of the overall data, but an individual can get up shots, and we actually have a grading scale that tells them the things that they need to work on. Is it trajectory? Is it average trajectory? Is it consistency of left-right? We can measure those things so that the player and the player development coaches know exactly what to work on. There's so many players that go to the gym and work on the wrong things today, and they don't get any better.
Well, let me ask you this, because we hear this a lot in the NFL, where a quarterback is drafted, and he may not be the most accurate player in college. And we're talking a little bit about accuracy here. Can this be taught? If they are not the most accurate shooter to start with, and you tell them these are the things you need to work on, are they able to actually fix that?
Sure. It really comes down to muscle memory, and in the case of basketball or quarterbacks or whatever the case might be, they're trying to perfect when a ball is involved. Whether you're pitching a baseball or a softball or throwing a football or whatever the case might be, you have to perfect that release point to get that ball to go where you want it to go. A pitcher is all about release point. The same way with quarterback for particular routes, and with shooting a basketball. And and you have to build the muscle memory to perfect that release point. I know, Tony Bennett, we've gotten to be really good friends with. We've worked with him for a number of years, and he calls us the launch monitor of basketball. That's kind of how he sums up what Noah does for players.
If so many teams have it and they are viewing it and looking at the technology, who then has an advantage by having this information?
Well, certainly the teams that have access to this data, has a significant advantage. If you have, again, it's a little bit like knowing the answers to the test, as far as knowing exactly what you need to work on. And so, if our goal, of course, is to, we're not trying to create an advantage for one team over another one. We're trying to make the game better. We want to, we want to see more shots go through the basket. One of the things we talk about around here a lot is making more shots and winning more games. The number one indicator still today of which team's going to win is the team that shoots the ball better.
Yeah.
And so that's, at the end of the day, we want to be in every gym. We want to see every player reach their potential. And there's just a significant number of players. To give you an example, at the high school level, less than 10% of players shoot the correct trajectory. At the college level, it's about 60%, and at the NBA level, it's about 80%. So there's room for improvement.
Why do you think that is? Is that poor coaching at youth levels?
No, it's not coaching at all, because it's consistent across the board. At the high school level, you have lesser skilled players, and one of the things that we've been on a real mission from an education standpoint is, for example, everybody thinks shooting higher is better. What I would tell you from a data standpoint, shooting too high is just as bad as shooting too flat. And I've got the data to back that up. Players effectively lose control when they shoot the ball too high. And so that's something that a lot of teams don't know or understand. And we've also found without that immediate verbal feedback, like our system provides, for example, a player shoots too high and it may say 55, 54. Having a coach or a parent stand there and say, that's too high, shoot it flatter, it just doesn't work. And it's the same way with a player that shoots too flat, where you say, hey, you need to shoot it higher. You might get the player to shoot it a little bit higher during that session, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't really change the muscle memory, because they'll go right back the next day and they'll shoot flat again. So that's just kind of how our body works.
It's funny, too, because when you say that, I think about it, and the perception of someone shooting a ball high and it misses has a very different feeling than someone who shoots the ball flat and misses. That I would prefer, if I'm going to miss, to do it in the way that's prettier and doesn't look as if I'm doing it the wrong way.
It's funny you mentioned that. I've asked a lot of players and coaches that over the years, and if you're sitting underneath the basket and you're rebounding for someone, the prettiest shot is in the low 50s. It's just, man, when it scores cleanly. It comes in with a nice high trajectory, but I'm just telling you, it just doesn't score as often. And so I've had that same debate with many, many coaches over the years, and it's absolutely true. Some of our biggest successes, individual successes, is lowering players' arcs. They see almost immediate improvement when they lower their arc. So, but it is a little counterintuitive.
How difficult is it to get someone who's made it to the collegiate or professional level, for that matter, to alter that?
Well, making changes are, as far as making change to the trajectory, that one's actually pretty easy. You take the arc feedback. We've seen teams and individual players have an impact on their free throw shooting percentage, for example, or three-point shooting percentage, have an impact pretty quickly. The ones that are a little bit tougher, for example, is left-right consistency. Again, as I referenced earlier, because that is so based on mechanics. And so a player that has poor mechanics, that's a tougher one to change than just changing the launch angle, for example, of your shooting arm, which is what the trajectory feedback training does for you. So again, back to the launch, just perfecting that launch angle. But the left-right's a little bit more difficult. Also, we have had a lot of success in working with players, getting them to shoot the ball deeper in the basket. For example, in the NBA, we have found it's the same way at the college level. Players on average shoot about 1.5 inches too shallow in the rim. All the elite shooters we've tested, that the guys that are shooting up in the 40s from three, they're all getting the ball pretty close to the optimal depth in the basket. But a lot of those players that are shooting 35%, 36% from three, they're shooting at 9.5 inches in the basket, which is almost 2 inches too short, and it's costing them percentage points.
I saw on social media that you guys were at the NBA Combine. Can you kind of talk about what's going on there?
Yeah, that was a great opportunity for us. The NBA did have us in we evaluated players, shooters for the NBA and for its teams. I obviously can't talk a great deal about the data itself, but it was a great opportunity, and we provided that information, and teams will use that along with aforementioned pre-draft workouts I mentioned. We use that data and that shooting information as they evaluate players.
What are coaches and players saying now that they would like to see Noah be able to provide to them down the road?
A couple of things that it's kind of interesting. We work really closely with a lot of NBA teams. And when we first introduced this product was a little over 2 years ago, the 3D version of our product. As you mentioned, we've been around for a while. We had an older two-dimensional product that would just track straight-ahead shots, and now we've evolved to do the all shots and also the ball position with the rim, et cetera. So what teams told me when we first introduced this new product at Sloan in February of 2017 was, John, this is terrific, but what we really need is for you to identify the player automatically with no sensors attached at all, no wearables, no anything. And so we went to work on that, and we've nailed that. We've got a system that uses facial recognition, no sensors, and we automatically identify who the players are. And then the next thing we heard was, that's great, but we'd love for you to identify the type shot. I want to be able to look at catch and shoots versus, on the move. Or I want to look at step backs versus a catch and shoot. I want to look at a catch and shoot when the pass came from the left versus when it came from the post. For example, you'll see some pretty big changes in percentages when you look at something that small. So we just want to get the data more and more granular in general so that they can see and ultimately have the data literally write a prescription for the player that says this player needs to work on this particular move from this particular spot and needs to get feedback on this particular variable. That's where we're trying to get to. Another thing we're working on right now is backspin because the left-right consistency is so critical, and backspin on the basketball is a very telling piece of the mechanics of that player. So that's something that we have in our development funnel now.
What's your background, John? Were you like a big basketball junkie?
No, I am a basketball nut. I would kind of classify me as that more so than but I'm an engineer, and I'm also kind of a software nerd, or become a software nerd over the years. But I've always, I was no superstar player. I played high school basketball, and I had an opportunity to play junior college basketball, but was no superstar by any stretch. But I've always really enjoyed shooting, and obviously read a lot of books and gotten to know a lot of some really good people that are real experts in the industry when it comes to shooting. And we've just taken a data-based approach to shooting. And it's been really successful, and we've had a lot of players. I wish I could give you details of, we've had just so much success with individual players this past year in the NBA and the NCAA. There was a player at Michigan recently that, I can't remember if it was The Athletic or the Wall Street Journal, did a story as well about how Coach Beeline had a player that basically who didn't shoot it well, but ended up leading the league in three-point shooting this past year. But there's so many of those type stories, and we take a lot of pride in those. Again, using the term helping players reach their full potential, because as I mentioned earlier, only a little over half of college guys are reaching their potential. Very, very small percentage of high school guys reaching their potential. And so that's one of the fun parts.
You may fall into the category of you know too much. So do you even enjoy watching a basketball game now?
Yeah, it's watching games are different for me today, and they're different for, I've got two sons that are 28 and 26, and they were like in middle school as we were kind of getting this off the ground. And, watching games now, when I see a player consistently shooting too high, which almost always leads to short misses, and I see the flat shooters, I see the guys that are doing certain things, and it is a little bit different watching a game today for me, knowing what I know about the data when it comes to shooting.
John Carter is the CEO of Noah Basketball. Thank you so much, John.
Hey, it's great to appreciate you having me, Brown.
Up next, Bruce Hamburger, Associate Head Coach at Farleigh Dickinson, on how a rising program is using video to improve practice efficiency. This is the Future Sport Podcast. So let's take a minute here to thank our friends at 3Advance. These guys are ranked one of the nation's top app developers, but that's not all. They've helped grow a bunch of sports tech startups like Team Builder, T-Box Tour, and In-Game Fantasy, but they're also experts in user experience, cloud APIs, and artificial intelligence. So if you're looking for a dev partner to bring your future sport tech to life, look these guys up. Go to 3advance.com. They're the team to make it happen, and advance you will. That's the number 3advance.com, and tell them Future Sport sent you. More and more, aggregating video of practice and games for a variety of uses is becoming the norm. They can be used by broadcasters or teams as well, many of which now don't involve a video coordinator. PlaySight is one of the groups working with teams to use tech to play and practice better, and one of their partnerships is with Farleigh Dickinson's basketball program, and their associate head coach, Bruce Hamburger, joins us now. Hey, Coach, how are you?
I'm great, Brent. Thanks for having me on.
What did the tech allow you guys to do that you couldn't do before?
You know what? I think the biggest aspect, and it's a simplistic one, but you don't have to rely, especially at our level, we don't have 20 managers running around like the high major program, so you don't have to rely on a person, a manager, to film practice. So literally our director of ops, who helps with practice in terms of timing and scoreboard and clock, et cetera, he literally goes on the PlaySight app, pushes a button, starts to record. There's multiple angles, and practice ends. He hits stop, he uploads it, and probably 8-10 minutes we have access to it, and as do the players. So just the simplicity of it made it. That was probably the first selling point when we had discussions with these guys. And in years past, we would want to film practice, we wouldn't have a manager, the kid would be late, and you're running around scrambling trying to get it. And then once you have the video on the camera, how do you access it? And if you don't have the correct software editing program, it would literally be unusable. So it solves so many problems for us, and it was just a really easy transition to using PlaySight, and the simplicity of it was very appealing to us.
And so you were able to find all the things you need to find quickly, right? Because here you have all this video, and you want to use it, and it's a learning experience to help build your team, but the machines don't have human instincts to know what you're looking for. So how does that translate?
Yeah, they have part of it. They call it's called like smart tracker technology, and literally somehow it's an algorithm that the cameras follow the ball. So you're basically getting an overhead view, almost like the football, what they call it, the all 22. So you get that overhead view where you see the whole court, and then each basket there's a tracking device that films that basket when you're at. So if you're doing half-court work at the right basket as you're looking at the court, it's there. The ball goes in transition, it becomes full court, and then if you get it in. So you're always having multiple viewing angles, which is Terrific, yeah. So literally knowing how somehow, again, this is where the technology, is past my understanding, and I don't ask questions. It just happens. But yeah, it follows the ball. Somehow it knows to do that, and you're getting just different camera angles, which is terrific. I mean, and again, it's really helped us because of the angle and the overhead view where you can really talk to, offensively or defensively, just the spacing and where you want to be on the court, your positioning, your help side defense, where you want to be, et cetera, et cetera. So it's as you said, it's a great teaching device, and this generation obviously is everything on their phones, on their iPads, on their computers, so they have the same access that we have. And the thing that I really like, we watch it at night. You go home, you watch it on your iPad, and you can pull up specific clips, and right on the iPad you can edit essentially. All right, here's a 10-second clip. I want to show our point guard, hey, this is great coming off the pick and roll, or hey, look at this, think about this. You can text it. You literally make the clip, you text it to the kid. You can put in, wording. Hey, here's what was great. Here's what you need to do better. And it allows you to have kind of a running dialogue with your player when you're home, they're in the dorm room, and they're watching video. So it's a pretty cool feature.
And you had mentioned here, obviously, your program doesn't have the resources that Duke or Kentucky or North Carolina, these major programs, have. I wonder if this extends in your mind to youth leagues as well that have even less resources than a Division I program obviously would have. Could this type of technology help with young players?
Oh, definitely. And I think that was my recollection of our conversations. That was a big starting point with them when they were developing the product, that they were able to get into, these basketball facilities that have leagues and camps and tournaments and put it in. So, and you can live stream. So even, there's a youth tournament that, the team travels, the parents sitting home, they can't make it, they can watch it live. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it appeals to every level. And I know they have Carolina as a team, Purdue. So, I mean, they have, I think, over 80 teams now at the NCAA Division I level using it. And, I think they're up to like 10 NBA teams and some G League. So I know the Warriors have it in their building, Carolina, Purdue. So really every level. And, yeah, starting at the youth and, the grade school kids that, again, I think video was never used at that level. And now, I mean, again, it's such a teaching tool that I think that's a really strong point that they have. I think just a strong selling point for them as a business. And I think as a grade school and a youth school coach to get these kids at a young age to understand how to watch video and to accept coaching and accept the criticism of watching video of, hey, you could have done it differently and here's how you do it. Yeah, it's a strong feature of the program.
All right, I'll let you go with this. Are you concerned that coaches get replaced one day by all this technology?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think so, because I still think there is, as much as the technology is incredible. And I talked to our rep at PlaySite yesterday, and he told me 4 or 5 new things that they have in the, kind of in the works for next year. But I still think at the end of the day, yeah, it's still coaches have the knowledge, coaches have the ability to teach the skills. I think the video and the technology is a complement to the human part of it, which is actually the actual coach. So I certainly hope not, but I've never thought of that aspect of it. That's a good point. But no, I still think you still need, because again, I still think the kids and the players still want that interaction with a coach, and there still has to be someone in charge of the program and developing things. But I just think it's a great compliment to the knowledge that we have. It's another way to teach and to utilize technology. And
there's no technology that will make everybody Steph Curry. That's the reality. That's the reality of it. Right?
If there was, we'd all be doing quite well. If we could figure out how to transform a player into that. No, that's a lot of hard work and reps in the gym and just player development. But still at the end of the day, yeah, as a player, you want to get to that level. You still got to be in the gym, getting up shots and working on your game. But that would be a heck of a technology if someone could come up with that one.
Bruce Hamburger is the associate head coach at Farleigh Dickinson. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
That will do it for us this week. Remember, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. The Future Sport Podcast is brought to you by 3Advance, developers of sports tech apps that are AI-powered and UX-focused. So if you're looking to create some apps for your startup or your sports biz calls for some artificial or business intelligence, you should check out 3Advance. They're incredible. Go to 3advance.com. That's the number 3advance.com.